everybody. Welcome back to the Quest for the Bestest. It's the podcast from Backlot Banter, where us four Backlot boys look at all 10 Best Picture nominees and decide which one of them we think really should win the award. My name is Timo, joined, of course, by Tucker, Tanner, and Abram. It's going to be a good episode because we're talking about Triangle of Sadness, Ruben Östlund, a bit of a critique movie. The Academy really tries to shy away from political movies, and this is, well, for instance, a notable exception. No. We're going to talk about it. We're going to enjoy talking about it. But before we do, I got to remind you what happened last time because we gave a movie a different score than 9.2 or 8.5.
My God.
We talked about The Banshees of Inisherin, and that film got an 8.7 from us, which put it right in the middle at the fourth spot on our list. So in between, if you can imagine this, in between 9.2 and 8.5 sits 8.7.
Wow. Insane.
Now I'm going to hand it off to Abram, who's got our featured comment, and then we are going to set sail on Triangle of Sadness.
Oh, hell yeah.
Yeah, this comes from
them too.
Tar.
What?
She commented?
Wait a second. I thought she wasn't real.
I've been going to bed every night praying that I can manifest her into existence, and I can't. But what I can do
Yes.
is we got a featured comment that comes this week from Weostar, who writes first.
Oh, yeah.
Hey, thank you, Weostar. We love when we get a new addition to the to our commenting group.
Yeah, that's me.
The actual comment of the week comes from somebody who isn't new, but I don't think has ever been read on Quest before. And this is our friend Philip Santiago, who goes by Phil the Pill in our Discord.
Hello.
In our Discord link, as usual, if you're on YouTube, in the description of this video.
Yep.
But Phil writes the following. Beautiful discussion, gentlemen. I do feel like online discourse about the movie concerns itself more with the constructed concept of cancel culture than the movie does. It actually kind of nags at me when anyone identifies Tar and Todd Phillips as primarily concerned with cancel culture. Maybe there's an interview with Field somewhere that supports this, but I've yet to find it. Tar actually functioned for me primarily as a modern ghost story. It's a movie about being haunted by your conscience when you're elevated into a situation that most humans only imagine. Tar also genuinely did horrible things. I think the fact that the movie is oblique about revealing exactly when, how, and why she did them is what sets people into questioning whether Field has a stance on her merits as an artist. The lecture hall scene is important, but it opens up a lot more interpretation than taking sides. It's just a fact of life that in almost all discussions, as in every BLB video ever, people are simultaneously wrong and right.
Yeah.
They're expressing a truth, but they're being fallacious about it. They fail to process what the other person is saying. Tar herself feels entitled to push physical and psychological boundaries in the classroom because of her level of acclaim, and she probably did not expect for a student who she otherwise saw as a docile punching bag to cuss her out before storming away. It's kind of foreshadowing for what happens in the proper plot. I was hooked by the four of you discussing that aspect of it, what you saw in terms of how the ending treated the character. One of your best.
Wow.
It is one of our best. And
Very
also, it
good
is
stuff.
our longest.
Best and longest. Worth your watch.
We'll have to see who's going to be truthful and who's going to be fallacious in this episode.
Oh.
Yes.
Yeah. I'm planning on being fallacious.
Okay,
I'm
Tucker.
planning on being fellatio.
Tanner,
I was waiting
we're
for it.
punishing you. You have to give us a plot synopsis for that one.
Let's see. Well, that's justified, Timo, because I have now seen the film Triangle of Sadness 3 times.
Thrice?
Yes,
I've only
3
seen
times.
it twice.
Ah. So, yeah, I'll give you a plot synopsis here. The Triangle of Sadness is a bit of a segmented film, but the core story is we are introduced to two models, Carl and his girlfriend Yaya, and their relationship's a bit on the rocks. There's some discussions going on about arguments primarily about paying and gender roles and things of that nature. But putting all that aside, they get a free trip on a $250 million luxury yacht. And they're surrounded by various other snooty, snobby, rich people who are completely disconnected from the lives and worries of the average working person. And things go awry on the boat. There's some bad food. There's a storm that happens. People barf all over each other and shit themselves to death. They are then subsequently set upon by some pirates who blow up the yacht, and we have some remaining stragglers, crew, and passengers who have to try and survive on the island when a bit of a power dynamic shift happens in the class and power structure of these group of survivors. And ultimately, what becomes of them and what is their fate? Do they make it off the island? We never really find out, actually.
No.
Mm-mm. Wow, very well done, Tanner. Very well done.
Thank you.
Who wants to jump in and then, start analyzing, digging into this movie and give us their initial thoughts?
I'll go first.
Abram.
Go ahead, Abram.
This was my first viewing of Triangle of Sadness, and I did not like it. I don't like this movie. It's interesting because just earlier this week, I watched Sorry to Bother You for class, and obviously they're not making the same critique, but they're kind of circling a very similar drain at a certain point. And so it's hard for me to not bring into conversation films like Sorry to Bother You that I think handle these sort of we can call them maybe socioeconomic satires and what I feel are more interesting in better ways. I found Triangle of Sadness to be sort of abrasive and meandering, and I didn't find anything of value in the characters for the most part. I just found myself sort of caught up in this spectacle that just became tiresome. And we'll talk about the vomiting, shitting, exploding scene in due time. But I think that's about when the movie lost me, and then it double lost me when I found out that there was an hour to go on the island still. And by the end, I was hoping that I was actually the one getting hit in the head with the rock. So that's kind of where I come down on Triangle of Sadness.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's interesting that you frame your disinterest as a pretty stark decline. And okay, this is weird, it's annoying, oh, this is too much, oh, I'm losing it. I feel not similarly because I actually like this movie, but I feel opposite in terms of that I like this movie, but also I feel that the movie does get significantly more interesting and the characters become significantly more well-rounded when we hit the island, which is, as you said, an hour from the end of the film. And I think the fact that this film is so starkly split in half is what makes it feel so distinct. And while I don't know exactly how I feel about its social critiques and talking about capitalism and communism and class differences, and there's a lot of themes going on here, which means this is going to be a rich Quest episode because that's what we like talking about. I think that the film, in its craft, in the sets, and in the set of characters that we're looking in on, that's where the film is engaging me. I don't really care too much about the external plot or like what it's trying to say, but I find each sequence in itself to be entertaining, and the structure of the film being split down the middle to be really, really fascinating and super unique. So even though this is far from my favorite of the films that we're talking about here, I think it's absolutely a very good film. And one that I enjoyed a good amount on a rewatch, though I don't think I got that much more from it. I was expecting to watch it again and be like, oh, I'm noticing what they're setting up here for when they inevitably have to go to the island. And no, not really. There's not too much setup and payoff. It's like you see Abigail like cleaning dishes and then you see her being the matriarch on the island. But I feel like if the two halves had been stitched together a little more and there had been a little more overarching plot and some set of payoffs, I feel like it could have been a much stronger project on the whole. But as it stands, like, yeah, very entertaining beginning, very entertaining middle, and very entertaining end. And hey, what too much more can I ask for?
Yeah. Tucker, I'm gonna hop right off of Tucker's comments there because I agree and disagree to differing extents.
Perfect.
Because
Quest moment.
I've seen this film 3 times. As I said, I was like, I have to go see it the first time. I drove an hour to a different theater because I'm like, it's not gonna come here. And then it did. When I saw it the second time, I saw it with Tucker and Tucker's father and some of our friends. And then I of course rewatched it a third time here. And Tucker, your comment about not getting a whole lot out of it on a rewatch rings true with me because as I've watched this film 3 times now, I'm like, it's a pretty thematically vapid film. It's really got one thing that it's saying. It's saying that the rich and powerful and wealthy are, they are greedy, they are selfish, and they are foolish and stupid, and do not deserve our respect and cannot survive in a world that is outside of the perfectly manicured one that they've created for themselves. And outside of that, I don't think it says a whole lot. And at the same time, though, I do find it quite entertaining. I found myself rewatching this film this time and remembering the moments that I really liked, laughing at the funny moments. still being entertained by the vomiting and the shitting, and accompanied by a heavy metal song and stuff like that. Woody Harrelson and Zlatko Burik's conversation, I think, is a good time. And but outside of that, this film is very concerned with its class-based themes, and it just doesn't say a whole lot. There's not enough to bite into on subsequent rewatches, which I do view as a significant issue.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I think I'll put the way my thinking on this film in very simple words. I was just kind of whelmed by this movie. I had been hyped up about it and ready to go in, get some biting class commentary, ready to see some crazy stuff. They'd kind of hinted at where the film would go after we're done with the ship, but I was like, wow, what's gonna happen? All these rich people on this boat, are they gonna like drown or something? We get some Titanic, James Cameron underwater scenes. We don't really get any of that. And instead, I think that what I find myself somewhere around Tanner and Abram. I don't think I disliked it actively, but I was just kind of watching it. The themes, they're there, but I feel like they aren't, like you said, Tanner, not super developed and not totally like groundbreaking or world shattering. Yeah. It's like, I've had these thoughts myself before without having watched this film. And so I just kind of was like, the second half was certainly entertaining on the island. I liked to see stupid rich people be shown to be dumb and awful was fun, I guess.
Yeah.
But like comparing this film to the other films that we've seen, I just find that it's kind of lacking. It looks good. The acting, the performances are fine, I guess. But I don't know. There's just it just doesn't have all the pieces. They're not fitting all together. And I do think it has to deal with the story and the thematic material, because our characters are all right. I mean, I hate them. I hate all of them. They're all bad. But like,
true. Yes.
That's how I'm supposed to feel. So that's not a knock against the film. Tanner, I want you to do those nominations, because
do those things. Okay.
That's where I think my thinking is gonna start off with. I don't know. What do the Academy think this film deserves?
Short list this time around, not the list of 7 or 8 or 9 nominations like we've been used to, just 3 for Triangle of Sadness. Best Picture, Best Original Screenplay by Ruben Östlund, and Best Directing by Ruben Östlund.
Yeah. Simple list.
Simple list.
Short and sweet.
Yeah.
Yeah. No Dolly
Unlike
DeLeon,
this movie.
unfortunately. Lots of people were anticipating that. I would have been very happy with the Dolly DeLeon. Maybe over like Jamie Lee Curtis and Everything Everywhere, frankly.
Yeah.
But, I digress. But where do we want to start with this one? Should we start in part 1, Carl and Yaya?
Why not?
Yeah, I think that is a good place to start, not only because it's where the movie begins, but because I do think that starting there makes the film feel a little bit strange to me. Is getting introduced to Carl and Yaya's dynamic, I think, is pretty interesting. At the beginning, they're having these conversations. It's bringing into light, like, okay, these are the themes we're going to be talking about: gender imbalances, class problems, how the focus on money. How does that impact people's interpersonal relationships? And we have 2 solid fights, 2 conversations, and then we cut to black, and then they become part of the ensemble for the rest of the film. And I think that is interesting, that we are introduced to who we assume are going to be the main characters, and they kind of not really end up becoming that over the course of the film. But I do think that I would have rather the film started on the boat and just present us the ensemble and give us that first 15-20 minutes to learn a little bit more about the breadth of characters that we have, rather than focusing in on Carl and Yaya, because they're good. And I like the idea of exploring male modeling and them having this influencer job that is impacting the way they interact with each other and others. But it doesn't really seem, because the movie doesn't focus on them, like their themes are fully explored. Of course, they're touched on across the course of the film, but I don't think that starting off with just the 2 of them adds too much to this movie.
Yeah, it's interesting because I also as I mentioned, sorry to bother you, I think you can also bring into conversation even more recent films like The Menu of the same year that this came out.
Glass Onion as well.
Glass Onion too. It feels like so many films are becoming quite class conscious, or however you want to frame that in particular.
How Green Was My Valley.
Of course, contemporary piece
Was
of
that
cinema.
last year?
Uh-huh.
No, sorry.
Close.
Sorry, that
We
was
reviewed it
2021.
last year. We watched it
Close.
last year.
But I think what makes some of those films more exciting or interesting is that we care more about the people that are situated within these narratives. And at the beginning, I found myself, and I texted Tucker to this effect, like, this movie is so awkward, it makes me uncomfortable, I can't even look at it.
Yeah.
And I actually think that's to its strength. I think it's not only a function of great dialogue, but also really interesting sound design. Those wipers scratching across the Uber's windshield,
Mhm.
the fly
very-
that's incredibly loud.
You are
as
Yeah.
they
you are
both- yeah.
nailing Östlund's directorial hand. I think this is very. I've seen his movie The Square, which actually I like.
Oh, yeah.
I like The Square better than I like Triangle of Sadness. But these are all you've outlined some elements that I think are Östlund's specialty, especially
Yeah, and-
people riding around in cars. He loves that.
and we can return to those elements at other points in the film, but I think it's sort of a testament to how in those early minutes I felt this really cohesive idea forming, stylistically and in the dialogue and in the characters. But ultimately, so much of the conflict between Yaya and Carl is specific to the life they live. And I think that we don't actually get that much out of them as people. So when you remove them entirely from the context in which their struggle and dynamics play out, there's not a whole lot to grab onto. But nonetheless, we still spend a lot of time with Carl and Yaya, and Dimitri to a lesser extent. But I end up getting to that last hour, and I feel like I know these characters to varying degrees, but I know basically nothing about the other people that are there. And so, to Tucker, I think your point about structure, we set up what seems to be a more localized character exploration to use as a sort of jumping off point for class and gender roles and financial positions. But ultimately, we take what is the least interesting part of those situations out, being those two characters, and drop them in something where ultimately they feel totally interchangeable to me. So one of my major issues of Triangle of Sadness is how I feel like I just don't know anybody. And Timo, I get that I'm supposed to hate them, and I do, but it's also hard for me to care about a film where I either don't know or hate all of the characters, I suppose.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna piggyback off you, Abram, because you mentioned lots of contemporary media being very class conscious, and I guess you could say eating the rich. But a criticism that can be levied at all of these recent things is that they're not so much radical in their pointed saying like the rich are to blame and we should take action against them, as it is let's point and laugh at how silly they are and not really take any material action. And I think Triangle of Sadness it falls right in that camp. But what I was getting at is, I thought of the television series, the hit HBO original series, The White Lotus, while I was watching this the first time, and how that film, I felt so much more engaged with that series because it's long form television. We spend plenty of time with every person, every member of our ensemble cast, whereas we don't have the opportunity to do that in Triangle of Sadness. I think we have a good setup with Carl and Yaya. Carl is very clearly insecure about the fact that he's not making as much money, that he is not the one who wears the pants in the relationship to say, but he can't say as much because he's trying to walk this line of eliminating gender roles from our relationship, and I want us to be best friends. But he's so clearly bothered by the fact that that is the case that he ends up being super passive aggressive throughout that entire first act. I loved the moment when he clearly doesn't believe Yaya that she didn't see the bill, and he's grabbing his chin like this as he's trying to figure out what to say, and trying to dig in at her. I think that's all good stuff, but again, it does fall apart when we are, it's shown the rest of the cast on the yacht and then more on the island, and that whole relationship sort of it starts on fire essentially as Carl becomes the sort of suitor for Abigail as she becomes the leader of the island. We really abandon that relationship and the conflicts that we were building in the first act.
Mm-hmm. I definitely agree with you there, Tanner. I think that the problem is that we kind of don't recontextualize the characters. I think it was one of yous was saying that we understand Carl and Yaya in their city metropolitan life, and that's how we're introduced to them, and how I think we're supposed to learn some of their character traits. which the traits follow to these new locations, but I feel like their characterizations don't. Like they kind of just now sit around and kind of seemingly don't do that much. I think that when we're on the boat, I don't understand how they feel about each other, and I don't understand what they think about the situation that they're in. I think that and we don't understand how the other characters feel either. We kind of like lose our characterization. The film like stops trying to build characters for us and instead just lets them play, which is all right, I think, for a lot of these side characters, these, rich people that we're just supposed to be like laughing at. But for our main characters who fit differently into the economic order of this film, because they're young, so they don't have this old money. They're presumably privileged growing up if they have modeling jobs, but they're probably way less rich than these other rich people, even though they still like have a upper class lifestyle. And so the film, I feel like, doesn't even try to do anything with that. There is clearly a difference between the class within this one class of people on the ship that it doesn't investigate, and it doesn't use the characters to push forward the themes that it's trying to convey. And when it does try to talk about class, I feel like in its worst, it's just like no pretenses. We're just going to talk about class. We're going to have two characters that stand for two different ideologies, talk at each other.
Yes.
In a very like postmodern, like we don't actually know what we're talking about. We're just throwing quotes back at that. But
we're reading quotes off of our iPhones.
Like neither of those dudes actually know why they support what they do. I don't know. I feel like the characters are just kind of weak in general. They make me hate them, and that's it. Like I don't know them.
There was one word that you said in your critique that I think is maybe misplaced, and that would be the lack of recontextualization, because I think that's the opposite of that is true, is this film is so focused on introducing characters and then immediately recontextualizing them on the island that you almost can't draw the line between them. We get the idea of the gender imbalance set up and this in the infighting in the relationship, and that is obviously translated pretty wholesale to the island of having Yaya be jealous of Abigail and Carl's relationship, and different kinds of jealousy, and how does that impact the way that they're each approaching these situations. But it's because there's too much recontextualization. It obviously happens pretty much on a dime, but it also doesn't feel like, okay, this is a growth of these characters. This is just, they're in a new situation and they have to react accordingly, which I think can be interesting, but it doesn't feel like we're able to watch them change over the course of the film. Rather, they are forced to change, and then that's just about it, and the movie just cuts so quickly at the end that there's no tail to that. It's like, oh, what does this really mean to them? Because we're cutting all over the place and we have so many different people that we suddenly have to worry about, that even though I do think the way that Yaya and Carl's relationship is recontextualized on the island is interesting, and it's probably the strongest through line of gender relationships and class dynamics over the course of the film, even that one gets cut a little bit short by the structure, as we were talking about.
I think what I would say, Tucker, and I'm going to sound like such a fucking... I'm going to toot my horn.
Just do it.
When I interviewed Neil Druckmann, I was talking to him...
La-dee-da. Look at Mr. High Roller, Mr. Journalist over here. Look at him. No, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Abram.
He was talking about this idea that I completely agree with, that he said very succinctly, in that he is interested in plot only as far as plot is a vehicle for characters. And plot as a way that characters have a challenge to respond to. And to your point, Tucker, I think that Triangle of Sadness works so hard to recontextualize its plot that in the process it loses any sort of nuance for its characters to get into. I think what's interesting with the island is the situation of rich people are suddenly in a situation they are no longer suited for. And I didn't think I'd do this as long as I lived, but I think that that's an idea that was handled better in Don't Look Up. Because I think the end of that film recognized that this is an idea that is basically the setup and punchline for a joke.
Yeah.
And we are in and out
What a great joke that was in that movie.
Yeah. And we're in and out...
Continue, please, Abe. Continue. I'll say something. Yeah.
Yeah, I just think that to me, there's basically the same level of depth in both of those. It's rich people arrive in this place and they don't know what to do and they're fucked up. Now, the one thing that separates the 30-second scene in Don't Look Up from the hour-long sequences in Triangle of Sadness is that we integrate the role reversal as a larger plot element. But I think it speaks again to this idea that you need your characters to be really central to plot for the plot to feel like much. And part of my problem is that Abigail goes through this really interesting arc, and the end of the film basically establishes this pretty overt idea that she is going to kill Yaya so people don't recognize us on this side of the island, and thus she can maintain her position in the social hierarchy and this power she has. But we spend so long to reach this simple conclusion, and we knew so little about Abigail before she got to the island that ultimately she is just a chess piece in the plot's idea of owning class, working class reversal. And so my enjoyment of the film ends up becoming plot level, and I just bounce off of it at that point. And I think that's the issue that sort of Tanner and Timo were driving at. Sure, the plot goes this distance, but I don't think the characters keep up with it.
Okay, let me talk about the Don't Look Up thing, because I think another key difference in that is, and I remember talking about this about the ending of Don't Look Up, is that my issue with it is not that it's a weak critique of the rich, of the wealthy. Sure. Because they arrive on this alien planet and they get eaten by the alien ostriches or whatever the fuck they are. When instead the larger point, which Triangle of Sadness does to its benefit, is point out the fact that without the working class to do these things for them, they are completely inept at running any sort of functioning figment of a society. And instead of Don't Look Up, it's they get eaten, lols, isn't that funny? Sure, if you think it's funny, but I think the class critique in Triangle of Sadness of the inability of the rich to function in this manner is much stronger and is present, in moments such as when Abigail is out in the reef and she's like, does anyone know how to clean an octopus? Does anyone know how to do this or that? Does anyone know how to fish and stuff like that? And they'll look around as they like snack on pretzel sticks or whatever. It's like, nope, sorry, none of us know how to do that. And then that obviously pushes her down the road of like, listen, you guys need me, so I'm in charge. I'm the captain now. I think is a direct quote from this film, famously. But yeah, I do like Dolly DeLeon's performance in this. I think that she's a lot of fun to watch in those moments where she is putting these rich and powerful people in their place. Even her former boss, she puts in a line. But ultimately, I think, there's also something to be said about how it's just this person gets a modicum of power and then flips completely, and we lack that characterization for her, like Abram was saying.
Yeah, and I think that's because we only see her in very fleeting moments beforehand. And I think that there is... I understand Ruben Östlund's decision to make this background character that we only ever saw as, like, part of the machine of this ship, and that's how the other people see her, as just, like, moving around in the background and they're not paying attention to her. Us realizing that this person has needs, has abilities that the rest of the crew, or, the passengers on the ship, most of the rich people, don't have. I think there's that idea there, but I do think that I agree that her characterization would have been a lot stronger, and it would have been a lot more interesting to see her grow into this role of power if we had known her a little bit before. And I'm hypothesizing a Triangle of Sadness that is a little more split in terms of its screen time. Of course, we already talked about maybe that beginning part. If they started on the ship, we would have some more time for some other people. But I think if we had seen Abigail's life on the ship and had her talk about the fact that she's had these run-ins with these people, and they're like, oh my god, they're rich and they don't care about us at all, and like talking to her co-workers and why she's on the ship, learn a little more about her past, it would have been a lot more satisfying. And I think kind of what we were it would fix kind of what we were lacking of, we don't get to see a change over the course of the film because she's only introduced when we've got 50 minutes left of screen time. And I think that she's one of the best elements of the film. She's one of the characters that sticks out the most in terms of having that kind of arc and really representing the films and and being that role, the ultimate version of that role reversal of getting the 2 watches on her arm and having the pretzel sticks and knowing, commanding people of like, okay, we need to do this, we need to do that. But then I also feel like she's the character we're kind of supposed to side with because she's the working class who is able to actually do things, and we're supposed to hate the rich, of course, as we've been saying. But then she also becomes a hateable character by the end because she falls into such a pit of power, and she's putting people down and insulting them and like basically treating them like dogs, like throwing the octopus bits to them, like, no, I'm the captain. Okay, if you get a treat if you like wag your tail at me. And so it's a little unfortunate that even like by the end of the film, the character that we're supposed to sort of side with politically, I think as the film is trying to convey, she even becomes a little bit hateable. But maybe that's the point, is like everyone has this sort of bad side to them and can fall into the darkness of having too much power. I'm not exactly sure what that's saying, but I think that complication could have been solved if we knew her better and were introduced to her earlier in the film.
Yeah. The one thing I want to say about Abigail is that I think that her place in the film, well, a lot of these characters I feel like work more towards this plot thematic level than like a character level.
Absolutely.
They exist in the movie to tell us about themes and to work out the plot. But the part of the themes in the plot of the movie that I like the most, where I am going to praise it, is Abigail's interactions with her boss, the manager, Paula, who I think that this film, it's one point of like original class conscious thought is in it, and very specifically including and highlighting the managerial class of Paula, who is the one that executes. She is a worker, but she takes the facade, the appearance of a very rich person, of the bourgeoisie, and then executes the orders of the owning class. So she represents the like enforcement of the order. And so and we see that again and again through the film when she's the interlocutor between Woody Harrelson and between the rest of the passengers, dealing with problems, kind of being that manager. But then when she gets all that power taken away from her at the hands of Abigail and basically is forced to relinquish her position to that of being in the same camp as all the other rich people, even though like class-wise, she fundamentally is kind of different from them. She's not an owner. She doesn't have a mansion back home. Like, she works on a boat. That is the one thematic point about the film that I think it does well, and I like, is the inversion and the ultimate like reduction and uselessness of the managerial class in a moment where the film proves to us that the people who do the work and the labor deserve the spoils. And so I like that commentary, and I think that not a whole lot of other films pick out on this small detail of the way our society functions.
I think that's a good through line, but I find myself frankly just confused even by ultimately what the political position of Triangle of Sadness is, despite, as I just pulled up from Zoe Rose Bryant, who's my favorite person in film Twitter. Shout out. Also just got followed by Sam Meltzer, so I'm famous now.
Hello.
Ding, ding, ding. But
I think it's because Sam probably watched one of our reviews like a day ago.
I'm sure you did.
Shout out to Sam Meltzer. Hi, Sam. You're probably watching this. This is Sam's favorite, one of the favorite movies of the year. So
sorry we're ragging on it so much,
sorry, Sam. You can leave a comment. We'll read it next episode. How about that, Sam?
Sure. Zoe posted this poster, which I think feeds into this idea that I was reading this Esquire article from Max CEAC, maybe, about the idea that ultimately the idea of Eat the Rich is basically pandering like to a fantasy opposed to making substantive commentary. And I was rubbed the wrong way also by this poster for Triangle of Sadness, and I'll show it to the screen. It says what?
I saw that today. Yeah.
Yeah, it says wealthy people of privilege. This film is about you.
Okay.
I think that's sort of
like the most on the nose possible. Poster you could possibly
it was accompanied the tweet from Neon that was posted with said, "Of course you voted for it." Was something like that. Which
I think it.
Yeah.
It speaks this idea that like the Academy is like it's just like this self-flagellating like nomination. I don't like my whole problem in part with this with the thematics of the film is that ultimately I think you can also read this film in a way that wherein if you allow the working class to gain power, they're gonna like go crazy. Because at a certain point, I don't really know what they're trying to illustrate with the character of Abigail. I also don't know what they're trying to illustrate with the idea that the one person who, even on a surface level, espouses any sort of leftist politic in
Yeah.
Woody Harrelson, is a drunk and has no fucking idea what he's doing and has nothing substantive to add and speaks about how he's a bad socialist for having things when, to be honest, that's not even like a really deep or correct reading of what socialism is trying to say.
I believe he says he's a shit socialist.
Sorry, is it?
He does.
Yeah.
So my whole thing is the film to me feels like this like combination of posturing and potentially confusing leftist politic. And again, it brings into conversation something like Sorry to Bother You, which I think is a lot better about having a protagonist that is a class traitor that is then punished and forced to be redeemed and leaves the audience with an idea about class solidarity. And I don't want every film about capitalism to have the same message, but I'd like a film about capitalism to have a message. And I just find myself feeling like the compass of Triangle of Sadness is just spinning. The fucking magnets, whatever make a compass work, are broken, and it's just twirling for 2.5 hours.
I think it's actually magic that makes compass work.
That's true. And that's kind of what I was getting at when I said that it had a very sort of vague, simplistic message, is that the movie is largely concerned with, hey, look at these rich people, bad things happen to them, isn't that funny? Which, granted, yes, it is funny. It is funny, and it's entertaining, but it's so clearly, it is what I'm talking about on each subsequent, that's the word, subsequent rewatch. I'm like, it's not really saying anything, is it?
Yeah.
It's not.
I want to think. So there's two areas of scholarship that I have dedicated the last 4 years of my life to. One of them being sound, and the other of them being Marxism. So I'm going to reference Mark Fisher's book, Capitalist Realism. It's pretty short, and I recommend reading it. And he uses media analysis to think about the idea that the end of capitalism is more difficult to imagine than the end of the world. And this film, he goes on, blah, blah, blah. There's a lot of writings about, he talks about Children of Men quite a bit in that book. But the point being that at a certain point in our societal evolution, our media will become anti-capitalist rhetoric and anti-capitalist in nature, when in reality, that act of rebellion is merely re-supporting the status quo, because the status quo is what produced the media object. And then with a film like this, where the criticism itself is fairly weak, like doesn't even levy, like you were saying, Abram, there's no solutions. I think that with the themes kind of just pointing out issues, but never really saying like, well, here's what you, viewer, do about them.
Yeah, it's placating is what it's really doing.
And so this film, I think, is a very capitalist, realist piece of media wherein it almost mocks pointing out flaws of rich people with this like Woody Harrelson character who like, how can you expect any change when you have your one supposedly like learned character who's who would have the ability to disarm and dismantle the evils of all the rich people? He's ineffectual and doesn't do anything. And I'm actually not even like, his character makes me very confused, because I really feel like the film doesn't know what they're trying to say about him, about he's not a communist, he's a Marxist. It kind of, it lacks substance, but I think it lacks creative thinking and an actual stance from Östlund in the deep background of this film.
I think, if I can venture a guess as to, you know, what we're saying, it doesn't really say anything, but of course it does say something, but we're just saying it's a weak critique. And if I can venture to try and nail down what the point is, and I think it's present both in Abigail's characterization and her arc, as well as the slight presence of the pirates in this film, it is that capitalism and the amassing of personal wealth is such an overbearing sort of function of how we operate in the modern world that it pervades every interaction, no matter the context. Because because I just remembered the scene where I forget the character's name, but it's the one that they presume to be a pirate, and at the end is pretty much revealed to be, I think. While he's shaving Dimitri, he's sort of like, he says, "Oh, hypothetically, this is how much you would make if you raided a ship like this." So that's a tip off. But he says, you do these things because you make 3,000 pounds, and I have a girlfriend to support at home, and that's why I basically pillage these ships and things like that. Or the character arc of Abigail is the exact same thing. Is that she is put in the position to amass power. And she does, and she refuses to relinquish that. So I think that is what the point is. That's what Östlund is saying, is that people will be, when given the opportunity, will amass power and wealth and will not relinquish it. And whether that be to become a fertilizer merchant, monopolize the industry in Eastern Europe, or get $3,000 by exploding a ship to support your family back home. In either case, I think the thematic reading is the same.
Yeah, I think that's probably absolutely accurate. It just, because it's such a large scale critique, it feels a little unfocused. And but I do think that through that reading and like applying that to each person and the way that they're approaching their thoughts on money and their thoughts on class and interactions with everyone around them, I think that absolutely applies to most, if not all, of the characters. So. Yeah, you know what? Yeah. I think you did nail it down.
And ultimately, that comes down to a point of, do you agree or disagree politically with that? Do you feel that, capitalistic greed is inevitable in our world? And, that's a political disagreement. And as well as the fact that do you think that the film conveys that in a clear and compelling manner?
Tanner, I think this is actually a good opportunity to switch away from our Marxist theory and more towards structural things, because I think you're right in part, but I think that reading only really makes itself apparent as you reach the last 20 minutes of the film.
Sure, yeah.
And I think that's a problem, and it speaks in part to this idea that we've just been sort of saying about maybe the film is pandering, not only on a political, philosophical, thematic level, but I also think in part just a structural one. Because let's talk about the shitting and vomiting scene.
Do it.
Okay,
Perfect.
Yeah.
We're about halfway through the review.
Yeah.
Halfway through the movie. Perfect.
Yeah.
We can get deep into everything, evacuating people's holes.
I don't want to get deep into any of this, frankly. I want to step right over it. Put on my waders, my rubber boots, maybe.
Galoshes, Tanner.
Yeah, thank you.
I think it's strange that we spend this elongated sequence watching everybody throw up in this sort of like initially metered way where we're trying to maintain calm, and then there's the device of the diegetic heavy metal music that becomes extra diegetic, and in what is one of the most insane and clever shots I've seen in a while of the ship rocking as that woman is shitting and throwing up and sliding back and forth in her vomit.
It's so funny.
It's clever.
Yeah.
But then it ends in this joke about, oh, is this my hand grenade? And then we do this like slow zoom to like the muzzle of an AK-47, and then the hyper long shot of the ship exploding, and then we're on the beach. I think that there's something to be said for how this film manages or maybe mismanages its time, because I think that there's a sort of a fun there, and we'll talk about the fun. But I also think that these ideas we're discussing needed more character time. And to Tucker's point from earlier, you could have really gotten onto the ship faster, gotten off of the ship faster, and then spent more time on the island developing character to reach those themes. But instead, it feels like our director wants to both have this big shit vomit explosion set piece, but then also sort of like this meandering walk-through theme. And that's part of my other problem with the film. For as much as I enjoy that, however long it is, despite me almost vomiting at one point.
Yeah.
I just feel like it's so immaterial, and it reduces itself down to haha, this is funny. But then, to me, you can only tell the same joke for so long. And part of that is subjective, but I think part of it's a general pacing concern. So I'm curious what you guys think about just sort of like the economy of how this film distributes its time.
Yeah, the reason that I like this film as much as I do, and seemingly more than anyone here, is because I'm watching this film and I'm interested in its class commentary and the characters and stuff. But what I really think the film excels at, and why I maybe would not have personally nominated for Best Picture, why I understand its high critical acclaim and getting into these kind of categories, is that it is incredibly clever in its moments. I think that each individual sequence, each individual conversation, the jokes that are set up, the cleverness of the boat rocking back and forth, and all the dominoes being knocked down, and even there being some setup of that earlier of the fact that the food is bad because the rich people wanted the people working in the bottom of the ship to leave the kitchen and go for a quick swim, so that's why the food is spoiled and that's why they're throwing up. And Woody Harrelson's character, whatever the hell he was doing for like
Thomas.
days.
Oh, sorry. I just remembered his name. Sorry.
Yeah, well, thank you.
I thought you were reaching for his name. That's why I shouted it out.
But
My bad.
the reason that
He was drinking. That's what he was doing, Tucker. For 4 days.
most certainly, yeah. But I digress. Well, actually, I don't digress. I continue. Is he? You guys really knocked me off.
Sorry,
my
I'm
bonus
so
spot
sorry.
Here. Holy Christ.
Derailment, man. Call it
well, no,
East
is that-
Palestine over here.
I don't know.
Dated. That's gonna date this episode.
Oh, yeah.
Oh God. Is when we think about each individual moment of this film, I think they're all very well done, and I think that as a comedy, as a clever, dark satirical comedy, I really like this film. I think it becomes a little bit muddled and confusing when you think about the characters and the political message and the structure overall. But each sequence I really, really like, and it's individual shots, individual moments of characters I don't really care about, but they're what I'm watching is entertaining to me, and that nowhere is that more prevalent than that 20 minutes in the middle where it just keeps ramping up and up and up of how ridiculous can this get, and the lights go out, and there's literally shit water like pouring out from underneath the doors in like sort of a perverted Titanic-esque like sinking of the ship, and we get that one shot of the toilet going blah 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 blah, but it's like at the like synced with like the whatever the guy's saying on the loudspeaker. Like there's so many clever shots and clever moments that I find very visually entertaining and clever, and I think this movie works best in each of the sequences, which on their own I'm like, yeah, this is great filmmaking, but it's just that larger scale context where the film kind of loses itself.
Well, the first time I watched this movie, I guess, I don't know, I didn't finish it the first time. I was actually stopped in this scene because I was feeling queasy during the day, and I sat down to watch the movie, and not a good scene to watch on an upset stomach. And so I paused it at that point. But no, this time rewatching it and, peeling my eyes open for the whole...
Take some Pepto.
Yeah. Take some Pepto, like massage my belly as the scene is happening. I do find it very humorous, and to just... It's excessive, I think. I think that's the right way to describe it. But I think the film kind of earns it in this part. We get the constant changing, and like you say, Tucker, the moment-to-moment construction of the film is very well done. The sets look amazing. The shot composition, the editing, the sound design, it's all working together to drive this message and to really like laser focus me into the scene and make me feel really gross and disgusted. And I like that the weapons dealers get blown up by their own hand grenade. That is a way unsubtle touch that was the right unsubtle touch for that point in the film. And well, I don't know. Good riddance. Good to see those fuckers get blown up.
Truly. But yeah, I think it is like what Tucker said. The moment-to-moment stuff is entertaining. As I said, it's funny to watch. Bad things happen to bad people. That's just good comedy. But it's just the bigger picture stuff when you're writing that screenplay that falls a little bit into on the wayside here. It really seems. But yeah, we can get to the fun of it all if you guys would like to. But I do want to throw it over to Abram if you have any thoughts on this matter.
Yeah, I think that the sequence is not. I think that it's. I don't think it's earned. Contrary to what Timo says, and
Mm.
the reason I feel that way is because, and I'm thinking I'm sorry to bother you so much, but it's such a good movie. I just watched it.
It is a
Yeah.
really good movie.
Hmm.
What I think is effective about a film like that in its absurdism is that its absurdism builds, and its absurdism is a through line. I think what bothers me in part about this is that at a certain point, while we do sort of we set up the rocking of the boat and things, we're basically we're basically saving up our absurdist allowance to blow it all on one big vomit and shit sequence.
Hmm.
And while I do think that there are, to your point, Tucker, some really clever shots in there, on the whole, it feels like, okay, we're just vomiting and shitting, and now someone else is vomiting and shitting, and now there's shit coming out of under the door, and now the shit's in the hallway, and now somebody is vomiting again, and then that sense of absurdism is neither found in the film before or after it. And so it
Sure,
ends up
yeah.
for me becoming this sort of whiplash of you want to be this more serious class comedy, but then you want to also be this insane vomit shit fest for 20 minutes.
Well, yeah,
And
it's
it's a sudden release, much like the bowels of many of these characters.
uh-huh.
But I just don't think that for me as a viewer, it maintains its sense of effectiveness, because after the first couple vomits, I'm taken out of it, I suppose, because I don't I don't care what the characters. I don't really see the sense of style in the other parts of the film, and so it just drags on. And also, part of it is just subjective that I don't find it that funny personally.
Sure.
Beyond the shot of her sliding back and forth and like grabbing onto the toilet bowl to try to catch herself is clever. There are clever moments in there, but I think so many of them are compounded by just like, and now they're thrown up again.
Hmm.
So I don't know.
I don't know if I would call it clever in so much that it is purely it's literal potty humor. It's
Yeah.
vomit and shit. Okay,
Yeah.
and that's what we're doing. It's not clever in the slightest, I would say. But sorry, I'm sorry for interrupting you there, Abram. But I was gonna say the dichotomy that you're talking about of the film trying to have it both ways is exactly present in that 20 minutes, because we cut away from people covered in shit and vomit and stepping over and slipping in it and stuff like that to Thomas and Dimitri literally reading Marx and Eugene Debs and Reagan and Thatcher quotes and stuff like that. It is literally in that sequence where it tries to have it, but where it has it both ways.
Yeah, I was going to talk about the other stuff that was happening in that scene. In that, well, I kind of just wanted to point it out that it's happening concurrently, which you did. I think that the inclusion of it in the scene, it doesn't strike me right now thinking about it as like two interwoven bits. It feels like if Eisenstein were to watch this, he would not approve of this use of montage, because while we get this,
Well, good riddance. That old goat's dead, so too bad.
yeah, well, he would probably like Woody Harrelson's character, because I feel like
He would.
those two both of their levels of understanding of Marx are about at the same level, and that's not very high. But
Boomed him, got him.
Get boosted.
I don't feel like they
Eisenstein,
talk.
Day.
I don't feel like they talk to each other. You know, I feel like the stuff about class, the two perspectives on class, that we get battling it out in a drunken, slugfest of quotes. It doesn't, to me, reflect on what we're showing with all of the rich people just being like totally wasted and fucked up.
Yeah.
Like they are, the film doesn't, it's in this moment like connect the hypocrisy and the mean-spiritedness that I feel like Dimitri's character is kind of portraying. He's pulling out these very, very raw capitalism quotes.
Mm-hmm.
And in a moment like this, I want these two aspects to really communicate to each other and to build to, A plus B equals C. This is the beginning, is the basics of montage. And it just doesn't do that. It's kind of like we got A and we got B. And then you view them separately. But they happen at the same time. So I want to get an understanding of both as a unit together.
Yeah. I think thematically, that's true, is that, like, there's not really too much support on the two sides. But I do think comedically, I would disagree. I think the fact that we continue to cut back and forth and we have, I think one of the great, like, the great bit of this that is not that we're doing shit and vomit is that they get on the loudspeaker.
Yeah,
Suddenly,
that's funny.
that is diegetically throughout the entire scene. And so even when you're watching pretty repetitive people sliding down hallways and poop coming out of the doors and stuff, we're still hearing a conversation that is on some level thematically interesting. And watching that devolve over the course of that scene, I think is well done in that they keep drinking and then
They
he
play red or
presumably
black.
buys the boat and they go, the red or black thing, like that's a great bit. And the fact that Dimitri gets on the loudspeaker and the first thing he says is like, ship is going under. The ship
is going under.
and you keep cutting to all the people like, is this real? They're putting on their life vests, so now they've got the life vests on for the rest of the thing. And then the poop water is like splashing up on them, so the lights are blinking. So when the lights go out, the lights on their vests are flashing. Like there is a really nice buildup of each of the shots and each of the elements, whether that's the ship rocking back and forth, or the loudspeaker being used, or people in different places having different reactions to all this. That is where I think it's like it's an orchestra of chaos in a way that I think does deserve a lot of its claim. It's probably my favorite part of the film in terms of its construction. I still would say that on a thematic level or a content level, I prefer the island section. But that whole middle segment is obviously where like the attention went. Is we're gonna have these things set up. We're gonna have all these characters react in different ways. We're gonna have each of the elements support each other in terms of building the comedic tension. So when it comes to the crescendo and you get that, I think, really hilarious shot of, oh, look, this is not one of our grenades. And then incredibly far away.
Yeah.
Yeah, you get the, and you see the poof, the puff of smoke happen from like ridiculously far away. And then the ship starts to sink. That is, I think, a really great, like, needle in the haystack. Like you found it and you poked your finger on the needle. That works really well for me.
Yeah, I think you're right, Tucker. But that moment highlights to me why I'm very much aligned with Timo, just in terms of the overall quality of that sequence, because that moment is great in that it pairs good comedic timing and interesting filmmaking with a point and a message. Yeah. I've had my PlayStation open to Amazon for about the last 5 hours, so I just want to read you this quick excerpt here, in which this claims that the 2-time Paul d'Or winner Ruben Östlund cements his position as contemporary cinema's leading satirist. And I think that's important because humor with no meaning is not satire, I don't think.
Clarity of purpose, bro. You know the quote.
Yeah, and I think when you lack that clarity in what you're trying to express through this sequence, it fails the intent of the film, which is to be satire. And so that's why I think that there is sort of like, again, this plot level humor to it, but that plot level humor doesn't feel tethered to anything. And so that's kind of where I come down on that part.
The quote is, satire requires a clarity of purpose and target, lest it be mistaken for and contribute to that which it intends to criticize.
Yeah. Sounds like the quote that I came up with about like, whatever the thing was. Oh my God, that's a whole other thing.
Anyway, okay, so we were talking about Woody Harrelson, and a thought occurred to me. A small thing, I like the visual of him just like leaning all the way to one side.
Funny. Yeah,
and there's jokes abound about leaning Woody and stuff like that. But anyway, I digress. No, actually, I continue to quote Tucker Hazel. I try not to critique films on my interpretation and idea of like, oh, imagine if it was this, because I try to talk about what's there, but I'm gonna do it right now, and I'm gonna cash in my imagine if this was the movie instead token, and that is,
how many of those do you have?
I don't know, unlimited
You've done it
amount.
Before, so.
Yeah, unlimited amount. Who cares? I try not to use them up though. Just one change. Woody Harrelson is on the island too. That's the change. and he and Dimitri's like antagonistic relationship as the paragons of socialism and capitalism can continue as the power dynamic is completely shifted, and even he can even have like a conflict with Abigail as like he's trying to establish some sort of like utopian socialist society based on his understanding of Karl Marx, and Abigail's like, no, shut the fuck up, go get me fucking octopus, you idiot. I think that it makes for a much better film, and maybe Woody Harrelson had to go shoot fucking Champions or whatever that movie is. It's coming out next month, but
Is he in the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, Tanner?
no, he would have been not born yet because that's a prequel.
Oh
Sorry.
no! I can't believe I'm not up to date on that. Tanner.
Sorry,
Woody Harrelson's
sorry.
probably pretty expensive, and this film, I don't think had like an insane budget, but
Look it up.
you know,
Yeah.
probably would have cost a lot more to have him in another hour of the movie.
Mhm. But anyway, I just think that
15 million.
yeah,
So no,
it-
not high.
it would have made the film stronger comedically, I think, for sure, to have a storied comedic presence like Woody Harrelson on screen, but also so much richer thematically, I think.
I think
Maybe,
you're right.
maybe.
I think you're definitely right, Tanner,
I
and
agree.
it speaks again to what I was saying earlier about sort of the ways that characters are picked up or dropped, or things don't really follow through, because we spend a good period of the time on the boat setting up this sort of tension and allure around his character, because he won't come out.
Mhm.
Why won't he come out? What's his deal? You know, they set up these little, even just small interesting. I keep muting to cough.
Mhm.
Yeah, couldn't do that one.
Not quick enough.
But there's little moments like him getting a plate of burger and fries opposed
Yeah.
to the other dishes, and there's real characterization here, but then he completely disappears without a trace.
Mhm.
And I think it speaks to the way that I think this film just tries to be a little bit more clever than it actually is, because I feel very similarly about the cold open to the film, which I sort of, because when we began the conversation, we were talking about the beginning, but what we were really talking about was what begins from the dinner sequence between Yaya and Carl on.
Yeah.
But there's movie before that.
True.
And
Not much. But it's
not much,
But a little
it's
bit.
still, and you still have, yeah, I mean,
It's like
beginning
4
your film
minutes.
is, yeah, but beginning your film is a very deliberate thing to do.
Mhm.
And why? I there's just so many times when I think about character emotion and character arc throughout the narrative, and I think on a script level, why? Do you
Yeah.
guys have any thoughts about how the movie opens?
It's on the modeling segment.
Yes.
Yeah.
H&M, Balenciaga.
And it really it's
Oh,
just more of this vagary about like
Oh, rich
these people don't care about you, the viewer, who likely I buy my clothes at H&M. They don't care about you. They think you're a fucking joke and they're laughing at you is what they're doing. That's what the point of that opening scene is, I think, and to
Yeah.
establish that, Carl is a little down on his luck as in his modeling work and stuff like that, and yeah.
Yeah, I think there's a line where the interviewer guy's like, "Oh, and remember, look with contempt. We're a real brand, so we will look with contempt on our customers and
Yeah.
look down upon them." I think that's some thematic substance in that scene that's trying to get us prepped for this idea that rich people, as the film presents them, have contempt for those below them. And I think it's shown throughout the film, all over the place. Even when the rich people are trying to act for the benefit, like making the workers go for a swim, that
Yeah.
is not helpful to them. The workers
Yeah.
want to be left alone to do their jobs so they can do the job well and get a paycheck. Like that's kind of why you work, and to be that interrupted with you must go down the water slide, you must enjoy yourself. I
Mhm.
think that is
I command you to sit in the hot tub.
yeah.
Yes.
That is a lack of understanding that manifests in contempt.
Yeah. But I just think that, to Abram's point, those first few segments of the film that are about the modeling before that dinner don't add up to anything. It is once we have the fight at the restaurant that the thematics start to characterize our characters and start to bring into focus a couple other themes. I think you have to do a little bit of digging to connect the Balenciaga H&M thing to the rest of the film of, okay, now it's companies and the rich, and maybe those are equal in terms of looking down on the lower class, but I don't think that it's strong enough or connected enough to the rest of the film to where it feels necessary. I think that honestly, if you, I like those sequences because again, I think they're funny. The bit of them smiling and going, making the faces up and down and up and down. That's funny, and watching them move one seat to the side, and then he's like, where am I gonna sit? That's funny. Like, but those are such small bits to where spending the first 7 minutes of our film on it doesn't feel that important. Especially when I think you could have easily cold opened on, here's a couple that are at a fancy restaurant together, and one of them's not paying. Okay, we can learn through their dialogue in both their arguments that they're both models, that they have this history, that they're both influencers, that's their conflict with each other. I don't think seeing them do the modeling really adds too much. It's flashy, it's fun, it's got some funny music and some funny lines, but I don't think it adds too much, especially because it's so disconnected.
You know, I feel like there's a number of scenes in this movie that feel like trailer fodder in some sort of way, that like they have been included because they make for a really good trailer, which this movie has an excellent trailer. I feel like the trailer sets up a much different film than the one that we get eventually, and the film's best scenes and best moments, I think maybe besides that intro one, all feature in the trailer. Like, I don't know, the way that this film put itself forward was like kind of giving us, it gave it to us all basically, and then under delivered when it came time to watch the whole thing. I felt like.
I did want to bring something up because we know we opened this discussion on Carl and Yaya and sort of the conflict they have on the regarding the gender roles of their relationship and how they want to do away with all that. We should be equal. We should be friends. There's a lot of conversation about being equal at the beginning of this film, both in their relationship, in their at the fashion show as well. Dimitri's wife in the hot tub says everyone is equal. Everyone is equal. But anyway, the gender role stuff I do think comes around in some ways at the end when Carl, of course, becomes a sexual object for Abigail, and how that stereotypical gender dynamic is swapped. The man in the relationship is the sexual object who is sort of, at the whim of the female, the matriarch, I guess, of this island.
The person in power.
Yeah, the person in power, exactly. Yeah. And it comes around at the end that, he says he wants to forget about it, all of that, but when it benefits him directly, then he sort of falls into this power dynamic very neatly, much to the dismay of Yaya.
Mm-hmm.
If we could maybe segue to performance for a little bit.
Sure.
Mm-hmm. I think that they're basically all unremarkable.
Yeah.
I don't know what you guys think about the acting in the film.
I very much disagree. I think that Carl, Dimitri, and Abigail are clear standouts. I think they're all fantastic. All of the lines that Zlatko Buric as Dimitri delivers are hilarious. They deliver with gravitas. He's got this like slumpiness to his performance. I love the moment where he's taking like influencer pictures with one hand on the chair, and he's like, his belly's like sticking up. He's got his hand up here, or him like blowing the whistle and giggling when they're running across the island. Like, there's so much physical performance in this film that is so subtle. I think that, especially that performance, and I can talk about the other ones, I think they're very, very good across the board. Some just stand out above the rest.
Yeah, I think that I'm gonna keep coming back to sort of like why Tucker is really defending the film and why I'm riding his coattails here. I think they're fun performances at the end of the day. I think back to the moment where I tried to interject with Tucker there when Dimitri is weeping with his wife's body in his hands, then he like stops and like takes the diamond necklace off and then like continues crying again. Good moment there. It's good stuff. Oh, I think my favorite just acting moment, just subtle facial acting, no line is said at all, is in the moment where they're doing like the donkey art show, and Carl has his hand under the jacket with Abigail and stuff like that, and Yaya says something like, what are you doing? She's like confronting him, and we cut back to what's his name? I wrote it down. Yarmo,
Yeah,
the
British guy.
tuxedo guy who's
Yeah.
like doing the art show. We cut back to him, and he's just like,
Yeah, I took a screenshot of that and I sent it to Abram.
Yes,
it's
it's
a really funny
his
moment.
face is gold in that moment, and I think that if nothing else, maybe it's the performers coupled with the direction from Östlund. I think that he does get those just fun, purely comedic performances out of these actors.
Mm-hmm. I think they're serviceable performances. I'm in. I view the characters, not the actors. I don't think there are any bad line readings. It's kind of unremarkable, I would say. I think Woody Harrelson has given better performances and given worse
Yeah,
performances. Like this one stands in the middle, and even though I'm looking right at his mug, I see Woody Harrelson, I see the captain in this film, and I believe that he is this other fellow that's not Woody Harrelson, and so
That's called acting.
That's textbook. That's 101, baby.
this
Pretend
this
to be
film
someone else.
succeeds in
Yeah.
having actors that act well, because I think the default state of most acting in movies like this is that they're good.
Yeah.
But none of them are like shouting at me that this is the best performance of the year. Nothing like that.
Yeah, I'm definitely not saying any of them are bad, and I think you guys have isolated some really good moments to that end. But again, bring it up one more time.
Yeah.
Sorry to bother you. I think it's really effective in how Lakeith Stanfield is able to sort of pull an emotional core out of inherently very comedic and bizarre moments, like being told, "Hey, we're turning people into horses, and they're called
Mhm.
equisapiens." And Lakeith Stanfield, I think, brings a dimension that elevates it beyond humor. But I think maybe part of why I find the performance unremarkable is I think they hit the humorous beats really well, but I don't really feel any emotional charges from any of the characters, for the most part, except when they're in the early scenes. And I do want to commend those, because I have, to be honest with you, I have very few good things to say about All Quiet on Western Front. What movie is this? What do we watch?
No, this is a different one. This
Triangle
is
Sadness.
That's
I
the one.
referred to my TV. The beginning, again, to what I was speaking about before, I think we reached this level where the dialogue is just right, and the sound design is just right, and there's the right level of like tension between Carl and Yaya to where I find something interesting in them, or just simple things like Yaya being confronted by Carl and her laughing. There's this manic component to the role that she brings, and I think that stuff is good. I just think that it never really reaches that level of sort of emotional depth for me, even though we do hit those comedic beats in performance through body language and facial expression and line delivery later.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that I mean, that's kind of what we've been critiquing this film on overall, is we don't get that emotional depth out of these characters. We don't get the arcs that maybe we're hoping for out of a film that's supposed to be these characters and their class realizations and all of that. But I do think that the performances are geared towards, as I think this film's intention, and Ruben Östlund as a director is geared towards, is those comedic beats and his exaggerated moments that I think all these actors really, really sell, even down to the supporting cast of the one worker on the boat who has to deal with the woman who wants them to take a swim, and she's sitting there and she's really conflicted. You can see it in her face of like, she's like, "Oh, so you're gonna go for a swim?" She's like, "Yeah, no." Yeah. And she's giving this performance. She's trying to have a smile, but you can see like the panic in her eyes as she's like stumbling over her words. Like, that is a performance moment, and seeing her like the corners of her mouth twitch. Like, there are so many moments like that work because of the comedy, because the scenario is funny. But I think it's the performances that bring those up. Even another small moment, probably my favorite Woody Harrelson moment, is when the woman is asking about the sales, and he's like, "We don't have any sales," and she like calls to her husband, and her husband's like, "Yeah, the sales need to be cleaned," and she's like, "Well, if he says it, boy, what are we gonna do?" And he like looks away, and he like says a curse word, then he swipes a glass of champagne, downs the entire thing, and like that one moment is a good setup and payoff because she's asking about the sales earlier. It's got a great punchline because you realize there are no sales. Like, that's ridiculous. It points out the ridiculous nature of the rich who are complaining for literally no reason. Like, factually, there could not be a reason why they're complaining. And he has this great moment of line delivery where he's rolling his eyes and grabbing the champagne, and those are the moments where the performances in this film absolutely work their best. And it's when there's crescendo moments, like Dolly DeLeon holding the rock above her head, like the
Thank you,
manic
Tucker.
energy in her eyes, like that is a
That's
performance moment.
Yeah.
And I think the film is full of those. You just have to sort of remember back to them. And the more that I remember back to things of this movie, it's about those moments. It's not about the construction overall, as we've critiqued, but it's so full of those moments and so many fun characters and fun concepts and fun setups and payoffs, not on a large plot level, but on a small comedic level, that this film still does rise above as someone as a film with craftsmanship behind it. Is like, these are talented people. I think they know what they're doing, but for us, the mark just was not hit.
Thank you,
Unfortunately.
Tucker, for bringing up the Dolly DeLeon moment in that like closing minute of the film, because there's the iconic like image of her, like she has the rock in front of her face and her eyes are just wide with like, I'm going to kill this woman and I'm going to maintain my position of power on the island and everything. And then there's the killer line of, I can do things for you, Abigail. You can come work for me. And then that single line, you can come work for me, is what seals Yaya's fate. Exactly.
You stupid rich
Exactly.
Yeah.
But I did want to ask, but I was going to bring up that and another thing in the very closing of the film. What do you guys make of the ending? Because the last thing we see is Carl sort of running through the bushes and stuff somewhere. We don't know what he's doing. We don't know where he's going, why he's running. But you guys have any specific thoughts about what happens at the end there?
I read it as he is running to Yaya. He is coming to her rescue, or he has turned his mind. He's like, oh shit, I actually love this girl. Like I am going to be not selfish for a moment. And we see him go there, but we cut away. The film ends before we know whether if he sees Yaya's dead body or if he arrives in time to stop and save her, and then what happens afterwards. I think that I'm not so concerned about if they get off the island or not. What's more interesting about the ending is the discovery of the resort on the island.
Yeah.
I think that
That's
calls
the best part of the ending.
that makes me think that the film is simultaneously reinforcing our stupid dumb rich people can't even go exploring this island and find out that they're not actually stranded. And that's a comedic twist. Oh, they're not actually stranded. There's people around. There's other people on this island. And so, what do I don't know. It doesn't change how I read the film. It doesn't recontextualize, use that word too much this episode.
No.
It's there. It's an ending that it isn't unsatisfying, and the cliffhanger nature of it still works for me. I am very okay with it ending in this unresolved state, because I feel like everything that the film has been going towards is resolved, even if we don't get to see whether or not Yaya is actually killed.
Yeah.
Aben?
Thoughts?
I
Doesn't
don't
matter.
know.
Doesn't matter in your
I
eyes.
just don't think it fucking matters. I
Sure.
mean, ultimately, the bashing of I just take a personal issue with films that just end ambiguously because it'd be funny or whatever. The one that famously really drives me fucking nuts is Inception in this regard.
Oh,
Is
okay.
the top gonna fall? But I think what's kind of weird about this ending is that there's really no ambiguity about whether or not she gets her skull caved in.
Yeah,
in my
she
opinion.
definitely does.
But then they try to introduce this what he's running. Is he running to propose? Because again, we cannot forget that the film spends time with him looking at engagement rings.
Mm-hmm.
I for potentially no other reason than to illustrate that can spend 30,000 euros on a ring. But he's running. Okay, was he staring at the inside of the escape boat thinking, oh man, maybe she's gonna go kill Yaya. I better start running.
Yeah.
I don't know, and frankly I don't care. I don't think the film is that concerned with it. It just feels like a shot that's there.
Yeah.
Sure.
And that's my problem with the ending. I like everything leading up to that. Yaya and Abigail going off together and having some moments of Yaya praising her for actually starting a matriarchy on this island, and discovering that they weren't alone after all, because there's this resort on the island, and of course that's intercut with the guy who's selling a ridiculous amount of wares coming up to the woman who can only say in der Wolken in the boat. That I think is all very good, but the shot of Carl running through the woods, I think, kind of ruins the end for me. Like
Sure.
there are readings that maybe make it more thematically interesting, but it's so random that, and it feels like out of nowhere because Abrams right. It's like, what is his motivation? Did he realize something? Is he maybe he's just blowing off some steam? Who the hell knows? That
he's going for a run. He's trying to get fit.
yeah, I mean, he's got women.
He's
to
getting
impress,
too
I don't
fat
know.
on that island, eating octopus and tree bark.
Yeah. But I also think because it ends so abruptly, that shot feels even more egregiously random and superfluous to me. If there was more of a tapered ending, if it did feel a little more deliberate, I don't think I would have too much of a problem with it. But we leave so many things unsaid and unfinished that ending on a shot of him running through the woods does nothing for me. If you end on the shot of Abigail holding the rock and you like cut to black and you hear the line like finish off, that's a fine ending. I'd be fine with that. Or maybe it's even when the elevator doors open and they realize that they're not alone. Like that's a fine ending. But I don't. The shot of him running through the woods, I think, kind of ruins the last 5 seconds of the movie.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I don't get much out of it, and I won't go on like you two chuckleheads just went on forever about it. I can't believe it. But I mean, my headcanon is that the guy selling his wares, if you see, he like turns around really quick right when before the cut happens in that sequence. So I'm like, oh, did he like? Does he walk back? Maybe does somebody else come upon them? Is Carl going to go run to them and tell them that they found somebody and that they're on an island with other people? I don't know. But ultimately, doesn't matter. In that last 5 seconds, completely superfluous. Frankly, yeah. I think it should have ended with Abigail holding the rock above. Maybe we cut right on the downward motion and that's it, and then we get our cool song or whatever. But yeah, that's about it. That's about all I have on Triangle of Sadness.
I think that the ending is just trying to like cast a spell of mystery over me, but I'm ultimately not ensorcelled by it.
We did it. We did it.
Yeah.
He did it.
I gave Abram a little bit of critique after the last episode. I'm like, you should use the word ensorcelled more, and guess what? He did it.
You're welcome.
God damn, he did it. Good on you, Abram, for remembering to do that.
Yeah.
Good on
you. I did mute my mic and listen back to the WhatsApp message Tucker sent me because I couldn't remember what word I was supposed to say. And then I didn't know what it meant, so I also had to look it up. I couldn't spell it, so it took a little bit of time. But...
Anyway. Scores, anyone? Scores?
Let's score this movie.
Oh, God.
What am I going to give it? I'm looking at my keyboard.
I'm glad we had this discussion because... my score did lower, but you guys will just see what I give it, I guess. No more mystery to build, that'll be paid off immediately, unlike Triangle of Sadness.
And mystery unveiled in 3, 2, 1. Okay, no tie today. We've got a fourth number on our list. We gave this movie a 6.6. And the point breakdown is that Tucker gave it a 7.7, Tanner and I both gave it a 7.0, and then Abram gave it a 4.7. That averages to 6.6 and puts Triangle of Sadness at the bottom of this year's list of nominees. What do you guys...
Probably where it's going to stay.
Yeah, I mean... I don't know.
I don't think anything's going to go below that, to be honest. I think this is going to be our lowest.
I mean, I personally... We got some heavy hitters left, and... Yeah.
Which heavy hitter are we going to watch next?
We're gonna venture into the mind of the sick and twisted mind of one Steven Spielberg this time. The darkened past. Oh my goodness.
The batshit fucked up mind of Steven Spielberg. the man who brought you E.T.
Make sure that don't watch this one with the lights off, folks. We're watching The Fabelmans.
So I've seen The Fabelmans before. I went and saw it in the theater when it came out. Did you all seen this one before?
I've seen it.
Abram hasn't seen it. Well, I will. In that case, I'm not going to spoil my favorite piece of trivia. Hopefully, Tanner can have this little tidbit.
Okay.
Well, this was a trivialist episode, boys.
Trivialist episode.
These have all been trivialist, frankly.
It's,
My fa-
trivia takes
my
time to
favorite-
generate.
My
It does
favorite
take
bit of
time.
trivia about the Fablemans is it's actually based on Steven Spielberg's life.
Yeah.
Wow.
Is that true? Wouldn't it be called the Spielbergs then?
The Spielbergermans.
The Spielbergermans.
All right, enough of that. We'll see you all next time for Steven Spielberg's new movie. I can't wait to talk about it. And thanks for joining me on this one. Good discussion. I think we succeeded substance-wise where the Triangle of Sadness did not. So bonus points to us. Until next time, keep it cool, stay warm, and peace.